I think that there are some real concerns with homeschooling, especially in Ohio, since it's changed in the last couple of years.
What was happening with the Cers children before they vanished from the classroom? We're going back 1 year before the children stopped going to school, because what we found may explain how they fell through the cracks. I'm Anjanette Levy, and this is Crime Fix.
The public record says it in one sentence. The 6 oldest children had not been to school at all that school year. Not 1 day, not 1 hour. That sentence comes from the October 2021 truancy complaint filed by Gallia County Schools. It is a government document, it is dry, it is precise, and it is the last time the state of Ohio was forced to look directly at what was happening. Here is the visual to carry with you. A child does not disappear in Ohio. A child is archived. 1 form, 1 checkmark, 1 signature. Their closest, the child is gone.
The 16 Cers children are in therapeutic foster care. They are safe, and hopefully they are with adults who are caring for them. But we haven't received an update about how exactly they are doing or what they went through in the house on Omer Street or the other homes where they lived in Gallia and Vinton counties over the years. I've told you before that the 6 oldest Cers children were once enrolled in school in Gallia County. We verified that because long before Gary and Elizabeth Cers were charged with child endangering, the Gallia County School District filed truancy complaints against Gary Cers Jr. and Elizabeth in October 2021, stating that their 6 oldest children had not been to school at all that school year. The school district considered them habitually truant, and the children were in danger of being labeled unruly children, meaning they were disobedient or didn't show up for school. At that time, the 6 oldest children were enrolled at Adaville Elementary School, but they didn't attend 1 day of school. Not one. But a year earlier, the children were enrolled in online school. At that time, the oldest Cers child was 12, the second oldest was 11, the third was 9.
Before we go deeper into what the documents actually show, make sure you're subscribed to Law and Crime Insiders. Because we don't just cover the story, we follow the evidence. 16 Cers children are now in therapeutic foster care, placed with adults, but safety is not the same as visibility. The public record shows how they fell through the cracks. In October 2021, Gallia County School District filed truancy complaints against Gary Cers Jr. and Elizabeth. Their 6 oldest children were enrolled at Adaville Elementary School. They attended 0 days. The district used the words, habitually truant. That is legal language for children who exist on a roster but not in a classroom. A form became a blindfold.
For that 2020-2021 school year, the 6 Cers children were enrolled in Gallia County's online school. Yes, you heard me right. They were enrolled in online school. I've confirmed the children were enrolled in the district's Southern Ohio Digital Academy. Whether the children were actually taking part in classes online, taking tests, and getting grades, we don't know. You might be asking yourself, now who exactly enrolled the kids in online school? Any guesses? Well, if you guessed Elizabeth Cers, you are right. Of course, Elizabeth enrolled the children in school. Moms typically take care of all of that stuff. Trust me, I am one. Elizabeth enrolled the children in online school on August 26, 2020. So it would appear that Elizabeth, the mother of the children, wanted her children to receive an education. But we don't know how active the children were in online school. The district isn't releasing that information, but in 2020, the world was locked down. A lot of districts were simply using online school. Enrollment in the online school in Gallia County went up. Now, during the last school year, Superintendent Philip Kuhn says 284 of the district's 2,100 students were actually homeschooled. That's different from online schooling.
1 year earlier, the same 6 children were enrolled in Gallia County's online school. The district's Southern Ohio Digital Academy. Elizabeth Cers signed the paperwork on August 26, 2020. The state saw an enrollment date. The district saw a student record. What the children actually did inside that house is not in the public record. That is the gap. Online school requires 30 hours of instruction. Homeschooling requires nothing but a notice. The difference is whether a teacher can still see the child's face.
Philip Kuhn is going to join me here shortly to discuss his concerns about homeschooling, the positives and the negatives, and more. If you love digging into the details of crime cases as much as I do, you have to download the Law and Crime Plus app. If you haven't checked it out yet, here are 3 reasons to jump on board today. Number 1, complete access. Watch the best shows from both Law and Crime and Court TV completely ad-free. Number 2, you get case files, deep dive access to raw trial evidence, including body cam video, 911 calls, crime scene photos, and much more. And finally, it's free for 30 days. We're giving all of our viewers a full month to test it out completely risk-free. Head over to lawandcrimeplus.com, enter promo code CRIMEFIX, and start exploring today. Back in 2020, the children would have been living in this house on Honeysuckle in Cheshire. I've told you about the house before. A woman who works nearby told us the house was so trashed after the Cers moved out that the owner had to renovate the place. She said there was human and pet feces and urine in the house and trash. It was a mess. A neighbor across the street had told us that the kids mostly stayed in the house, but he had seen them playing outside. And at that time, he thought there were 9 children. So how much schooling was actually taking place in the house on Honeysuckle during the 2020-2021 school year? The district isn't telling us how often the Cers children took part in school online. That is information the district can't release. But Elizabeth Cers had just met the deadline for enrolling her children back in 2020 for online school as required by statute. The state statute—
By the numbers, Gallia County had 284 homeschooled students out of 100. That is 13%. 15 years ago, the number was 34. But the number is not the indictment. The mechanism is. The children were living on Honeysuckle Street in Cheshire. A woman who worked nearby said the house was so trashed after the family moved out that the owner had to renovate. Human and pet feces, urine, trash. A neighbor across the street said the kids mostly stayed inside. That is not a homeschool. That is a closed system.
Statute reads, within 5 calendar days after commencing home education, moving into a new school district, or withdrawing from a public or non-public school, and by the 30th day of August each year thereafter, the parent or guardian of a child receiving a home education shall transmit a notice to the superintendent of the child's school district of residence. The notice shall provide the parent's name and address, the child's name, and an assurance that the child will receive education in the subject areas required under this section. The child's exemption under this section is effective immediately upon receipt of notice. The district superintendent shall provide a written acknowledgement of the superintendent's receipt of the notice to the parent or guardian not later than 14 calendar days after receiving the notice. Now, that was the homeschooling information. This raises another question. Why did Elizabeth Cers wait until the deadline to register her children for online school? And where were they attending school before 2020? There's only one other school district in Gallia County. Now, I've told you previously that Children's Services had had some type of contact with the Cers in Gallia County, and that was part of the reason that they moved. Was this contact part of the reason why Elizabeth registered the children for online schooling? Okay, so to discuss this whole issue of online schooling and homeschooling, I want to bring in Philip Kuhn. He is the superintendent of the Gallia County local school district out there in Gallia County, Ohio. This is where the Cers children were enrolled in school for a time. So Philip Kuhn, thank you so much for coming on. I know you're busy getting ready for the school year, and you're entering your 6th year now as superintendent.
Correct, yeah.
Under Ohio statute, a parent who begins home education must transmit a notice to the school superintendent. The notice must include the parent's name, the child's name, and an assurance that the child will receive education in the required subjects. The exemption is effective immediately upon receipt. The superintendent acknowledges within 14 days. No inspection, no interview, no curriculum, no test. The state calls this compliance. A child calls it abandonment.
Yeah. Excited about the school year.
Yeah. I know we're getting ready for it in my house too. Tell me if you would. You offer online schooling. You have a digital academy there in Gallia County. But the kids are online doing school. Do you have concerns about that? How do you feel about online schooling, despite the fact that you guys offer it?
I think in today's world, it's a good option to have, especially I think given the ease of just going to homeschooling per se. So families can decide, just to go to homeschooling and have no connection to a school district. And I think that for some of those families that are considering that, the online schooling might be at least some way that we can kind of bridge that gap and stay connected with families. Online schooling, I think all educators would say, is not the best way to educate kids. We want, our teachers do the best they can with that format. However, being in person with an educator throughout the day, we would always think that that's the best way to receive instruction.
Philip, what are the requirements for online school? I mean, you just log on? Do you chat with a teacher on there? I mean, what happens?
Yeah, our online school has 30 hours of required instruction. So we do have an online platform with the various subjects that students will work through modules, and it's more for our middle school and high school students. And so they log on during the week and work through those modules. And we do have teachers available for Google Meets to talk and discuss the instruction. And then certainly if a student has an IEP and we need to meet those needs for an IEP, there are already meetings set up so that they can meet with the teacher and talk through, the interventions that are necessary to help that child to get on grade level. So it's very similar to a regular, the requirements are similar to a regular school day. However, I would always say that, being in person in a classroom is always the best way to learn. That way you're getting that, feedback in real time. Many people that are online don't take the time to, or don't take the opportunity to ask questions. And so when you're in a classroom, you're learning to work in teams, work in groups, and certainly you're getting more feedback from our instructors. So I would always say that, being in the classroom and in our buildings is the best way to receive instruction. I would say that also that, we learned a lot through COVID. Online learning is not the best platform. However, some families, it's a good option because it's better to have that online option than to not come at all. And we see with homeschooling that at any point they can decide just to go ahead and go to homeschooling. And we'd rather have them at least to be online with us so we have some sort of connection with them and way to monitor their progress. Our online students also take assessments, state assessments, and they have to come into the building to take those state assessments. So we do get to see them face to face in those situations. It's just another way that we can, be in touch with families, be in touch with students, and, be able to monitor them just a little.
The superintendent of Gallia County Local Schools explained how online learning works. 30 hours of required instruction, modules, teachers available by video, state assessments taken in person. That last part matters. An online student must still show their face. A homeschooled student does not. That is not a small distinction. It is the difference between being seen and being erased. When the last camera turns away, who is left watching?
Is that similar to a child in your district attending actual school? Because I guess 6 hours a day would be considered a school day, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Let's talk now about this whole issue of homeschooling. Homeschooling, you hear about people who do it and they say, "Oh my God, it's amazing! You give the kids more attention, more individualized, a more individualized, personalized experience." However, you're not getting the structure of a classroom. You're not getting the socialization.
I'm sure there are some families that do homeschooling really well. I know I go to church with several families that choose to homeschool and do that for religious reasons and have great kids and bright kids. I think it just depends on the family and whether their family structure can provide the right atmosphere for that. I think, like you said, the structure of being in school is, having to be at a certain place at a certain time, having to get up in the morning like we would do as adults to arrive at work. That's always beneficial. So it's the structure, I think, of being in person that is beneficial. And then I would say, generally speaking, there are many people who struggle with providing the instruction for homeschooling. And I think that we see that whenever we have kids that maybe have been homeschooled for a while and then come back to school. because when we do standardized testing, many times they're well below grade level. And so I think the consistency of the instruction of being in person is beneficial. The structure of being in person is beneficial. And then that checks and balances too, I think, of just being cared for and having basic healthcare needs or, meals being met. When you come to school, you're going to be provided with lunch. And we have, caring adults here that are going to be watching out and trying to support you as a whole child, whether it be medical needs or what have you. So I think that there are some real concerns with homeschooling, especially in Ohio, since it's changed in the last couple of years, that now, parents do not have to give you a curriculum that they're following, and there's no assessments that have to be completed. So it's for those people who don't do it well, sometimes they may not even know they're not doing it well because they're not giving assessments that would measure the growth of a child. So I do have real concerns about homeschooling in general. I will say again that some people do it, I think, probably pretty well, but there are a lot of people who struggle to meet, the kind of standards or education that you would get in person.
The superintendent said some families homeschool well. Then he said what the district sees when homeschooled children come back to the classroom. They are often far below grade level. He called the classroom a check and balance. Lunch is provided. Dental care is noticed. A teacher is a mandatory reporter. In Ohio, mandatory reporters are the eyes of the state. Take the child out of the classroom and you remove the eyes. That is not a parental right. That is a visibility collapse.
Break that down a little bit. You said there was a change that took place. Prior to that change taking place in Ohio, were the parents required, when they were saying, hey, I'm going to homeschool my child, were they required to follow a curriculum and provide a curriculum? Or how did that work prior to this change?
The change happened in October of 23. And so before that time, parents would submit the curriculum that they would be using to provide instruction for reading, math, social studies, science, etc. And then there would have to be a licensed teacher that would sign off on the completion of that at the end of the year, or an assessment where, taking, a state assessment or a district level assessment so that you could measure the progress. And that way you can ensure that education was happening. Now, parents can simply just, submit a form saying we're choosing to homeschool, and then there's no accountability past that.
In October 2023, Ohio changed the law. A parent had to submit a curriculum, a licensed teacher had to sign off, an assessment had to be completed. Now a parent files a one-page notice. No curriculum, no testing, no accountability. The state calls it educational freedom. The effect is different. A form became a blindfold.
Wow. So it's like the wild, wild west. I'm going to homeschool my kid, and I'm just going to do it my way, and I don't have to tell you what I'm doing.
That's correct. So there's a lot of concern with that. And additionally, from my understanding, you can basically decide your child's graduated and have a diploma for them, and no one's able to, verify what's been accomplished.
So it's like you graduate from the Smith Family School of Homeschooling?
We actually had someone that submitted, a transcript saying that they had attended, I think, a certain name of their academy, which was just their family name. So, yes.
That's astounding to me, because I thought, I guess I was wrong. I thought if you were going to homeschool your child, you'd have to have some correspondence with a school district and be like at least taking tests and doing all of this stuff. But you're saying there was a change that took place at the state level, and now it's just like, my child's going to attend the Anjanette Levy School of Homeschooling, and I said the child's, we're good. He or she has graduated, and that's it.
That's correct. And it's a real concern, I think, for our society, because I think we're not preparing. It's an educational neglect, really. We're not preparing a percentage of our students, to go out into the real world and be able to interact with other people, to be able to read at grade level, just to help them have the tools to be successful.
Okay.
Now, the superintendent said a parent can issue a diploma from the family academy, no outside verification. He called it educational neglect. That is a public school superintendent using the word neglect. Here is the thriller question: when the system stops asking for proof, how long before a house on Omar Street becomes a crime scene instead of a homeschool? The answer is in the timeline. The children were invisible on paper long before they were invisible to investigators.
Now, I know that you really can't talk about the Cers case. However, I'm going to just touch on something that is a concern related to that. And that is the concern that teachers and school superintendents, such as yourself, school staff, are mandatory reporters when it comes to potential abuse and neglect.
Correct.
Oftentimes, when kids come from backgrounds where they don't have a lot or they're in need, sometimes kids, the only meal they get is at school. It's sad, but it's true. And I know, like, at my son's school around the holidays, they talk about, the kids that need it. They send home like meal packs and stuff like that. So the kids still have food. And oftentimes these schools, teachers, school staff are the first ones to spot signs of neglect and abuse. So with regard to homeschooling, talk to me about the concern with that.
Teachers, principals, school nurses, they are required by law to report suspected abuse. That mandate does not apply to a closed front door. The superintendent said public school is the village. That is not nostalgia. That is the surveillance infrastructure of childhood. When you remove the child from the village, you remove the only adults who are legally obligated to sound an alarm. The house did not hide the children. The paperwork did.
We talked earlier in the show about the number of students in your district who are homeschooled. It's like 280 something out of 2,100.
284. We finished last year with 284 students being homeschooled out of approximately a little over 2,100 students. So we're somewhere between 12 to 13% of our students, potential students, that are being homeschooled at this time, which is a larger percentage, I think, than many other districts. But we've definitely seen that number, that percentage, really climb over the years. I've researched it back over the last 15 or so years, and that number, has drastically increased. I think the first year that I looked at it, we were about 34 students being homeschooled. And then I think that number really took off during COVID when that was, happening regularly. And so, again, I think the change in legislation really accelerated that, because now there's really no accountability. And so if another piece of this, I think, is chronic absenteeism. So we're responsible for reporting when students aren't, attending. And so when there's pressure to attend and there's potential, a legal situation, then parents can just choose to go ahead and homeschool. And then that takes care of the legal obligation to send your child to school.
Gallia County has watched homeschooling numbers from 34 to 284. COVID gave families a preview. The 2023 law gave them a permanent exit. The district reports chronic absenteeism. 22% of students missed 10% of the year. But those children are still on the books. Homeschooled children are not even on the books. That is the gap between being counted and being lost.
Have a lot of habitual truants?
So I'm going to go back to what's called chronic absenteeism, which is 10%, missing 10% of the year. And that's something we report to the state. So out of a 180 day school year, 18 days approximately that they're missing. And we had 22% of our students that were chronically absent this past year. I think that's actually a little below the state average, if I recall correctly. 22% is actually down for us. The year before, we had 26% of our kids that were chronically absent, met that definition. And so it's a real concern in Ohio, to get that number down. I think that, when you're missing that large of a percentage, you're going to struggle to keep up in school. And so, again, the ability to homeschool easily, I think is something that people do whenever, sometimes they do that because they don't want to face the requirement of coming to school.
Wow. That's wild. So you just don't even know how those kids are doing, and they're just, you have no clue what could be going on with these kids.
When they're homeschooled, correct. Now, when they're still on our what I'll call on our books, they're still connected with us and not unenrolled. We are still doing what we need to do to make contact with families, have diversionary hearings for attendance, involving law enforcement or the courts, juvenile court. But once they decide to go to homeschooling, we don't have a lot of teeth at that point. We don't have, they're outside of our reach.
Well, that
the
is,
superintendent said something that should stop every parent cold. When a child is chronically absent, the district can bring in juvenile court. But if a parent simply files a homeschool notice, the legal obligation to send the child to school disappears. The system does not punish the absence, it rewards it with silence. A form became a blindfold.
Year.
We'd love to see that because we want kids to be here. We feel like we're the best, place to get an education. And, our scores have been indicating that over the last several years. We're having some of our highest achievement that we've had in many years. And so we know this is a place that they can grow and become good readers and be able to do math at a proficient level, which is key. And so we've improved in that area, and we know that we can provide great instruction. And again, like you said, they may be able to do that within their families in that home in some cases, but the percentages of that are very low in my estimation.
Mm-hmm. Well, we are wishing you the best of luck with this upcoming school year and all of the kids as well and their parents. Mr. Kuhn, Philip Kuhn, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you about it. It's a very important subject.
Records show that Elizabeth Cers attended Gallia County local schools when she was younger, but she withdrew in 2008 when she was 15 to take part in homeschooling. That was the same year she was married and gave birth to her first child. There's no record of Gary Cers Jr. attending the schools. Gary Jr., Elizabeth, and Christina Cers remain in the Southeast Ohio Regional Jail, charged with child endangering. They've all pleaded not guilty. Gary Sr. is in an undisclosed location, free on bond. Attorneys for all four Cers family members have raised issues about their competency. Remember, you can read the entire case file about the Cers case on our app, Law and Crime Plus. Download it and check it out. And that's it for this episode of Crime Fix. I'm Angela.
Elizabeth Cers herself was pulled from school in 2008 at age 15. She was married and gave birth the same year. That is not a coincidence. It is a pattern repeated across generations. She never received a diploma from a verified school. She received a marriage certificate and a closed front door. Today she sits in Southeast Ohio Regional Jail charged with child endangering. Her attorneys raise competency issues. That is a legal defense. It does not explain how 6 children attended 0 days of school without a single welfare check. Here is your assignment. Pull the October 2021 truancy complaint filed by Gallia County Schools. Look at the attendance column. Then tell me in the comments how many zeros does it take before the state sees a child. If you found this breakdown useful, like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications for Law and Crime Insiders. We follow the evidence.